Okay, so when we initially get the title request, the first thing we do is order title because especially in COVID times, title is taking a lot longer to come back. The second thing we do is typically send a welcome email so people can understand the process. We try to give an outline of the process and what to expect. The third, which is probably the most important thing and the thing we don't get back the most, are the information sheets. When the seller and the buyer fill out their information sheets, it lets us know what type of closing we're going to have. If there's going to be a mail away, if there's a power of attorney, if there's an estate, because there are certain things we need with certain closings, a trust. So anytime there's anything outside the ordinary of an individual selling a property to an individual, those are things we need to know. We also reach out to the HOA or condo association if one exists, because we need documentation from them as well. So there's a lot to be done before we even get title. And I look at title and then there may be more things that have to be done because I need to clear that title.
You are listening to the Real Estate Proverbs Podcast with host Kevin Jefferson. This is the #1 podcast for African-American real estate professionals who are doing extraordinary things. It's time to tune in. And now, your host, the People's Lender, Kevin Jefferson.
Hello, welcome to the Real Estate Proverbs Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Jefferson, and today we have a guest by the name of Miss Jacinda Walker. How are you, Jacinda?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
That is good. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in, sheesh, it might be 2 years.
I know, COVID got us in the house with these children.
Yeah, they do. So tell us a little bit about who you are, Jacinda.
All right, I'm a real estate attorney. I've been in real estate for about 10 years now. I'm also an investor. I'm a mom, hence why I'm outside, because my loud children are in the house. We have not started school yet. I'm a sports enthusiast, and, I'm doing this entrepreneur thing, which is a lot harder than what I thought it was before I got into it.
Got you. So what got you into real estate law?
I have a background in finance, and when I was in firm life, I think they just kind of stuck me there. So it was coincidence. It was not what I wanted. I started out doing real estate litigation, and then they had a vacancy that was filled. Basically, it wasn't a planned vacancy, and they needed somebody to help out. And so I started helping out in real estate, in the real estate department of that firm. And then I just stayed real estate and would split time between litigation and real estate.
Okay, cool. What do you have a specialization?
I don't really have a specialization. I mean, we do closings at our firm, but we really are a full service real estate firm. So because I've touched everything. We deal with title problems. We have HOA clients, so we represent the property management companies. I don't do quiet titles because they're so specialized, but we do the barment. We participate in the barment process, getting it ready for quiet title. So we're pretty much all around. Anything that has to do with real estate, we can handle. Got you.
So what's barment, if you can explain that?
So for tax liens, when people are foreclosing on the right to redeem, the older term is called barment. That's what it's called when you go through the legal process to say you can no longer redeem this property.
Okay, cool. Matter of fact, I got a client for you.
Okay.
I got a client for you. I do. I'll send you the information.
Okay.
To after this. So on your side, right, of closings, let's talk about that process. And the reason why I said let's talk about that process is because a lot of times I think that there's a misconception that the attorney's office doesn't have a lot to do on their end to get closings done. When I know it's different because we work directly with you. Let's talk about some of the things that you guys go through to get things to closing, starting from when you initially get the title request from us as lenders.
Okay, so when we initially get the title request, the first thing we do is order title because especially in COVID times, title is taking a lot longer to come back. The second thing we do is typically send a welcome email so people can understand the process. We try to give an outline of the process and what to expect. The third, which is probably the most important thing and the thing we don't get back the most, are the information sheets. When the seller and the buyer fill out their information sheets, it lets us know what type of closing we're going to have. If there's going to be a mail away, if there's a power of attorney, if there's an estate, because there are certain things we need with certain closings, a trust. So anytime there's anything outside the ordinary of an individual selling a property to an individual, those are things we need to know. We also reach out to the HOA or condo association if one exists, because we need documentation from them as well. So there's a lot to be done before we even get title. And I look at title, and then there may be more things that have to be done because I need to clear that title.
Got you. So when you say you guys do title searches, how far back do you go to research?
It depends on what's going on with the property. So for refinances, it's usually 2 owners. And then for purchases, traditional purchases, it's going to be 100 years or 3 owners. So if an owner has owned the property for 100 years, it's going to go back pretty far, but most don't. Typically people own property anywhere from 5 to 7 years. So typically it takes us back 15 to 20 years, but there are some circumstances in which we have to go back and look at records because we need 3 owners. And when that happens, we have to physically go down to the courthouse, pull the records because they don't have it uploaded, and actually make copies of the abstract that's in the courthouse.
Wow. So I have a file right now where we don't have clear title. And we don't have clear title because there's no description of the length and width of the lot. And without that information, the attorney says that the title company will not insure the title policy.
Absolutely. At that time, you would have to get a survey.
Right.
To get a legal description. Yes, absolutely. Right. And, back in the day, I'm going to be honest, they didn't really have legal descriptions like we have with degrees. And so some of the older legal descriptions are insufficient. So if it's been, 70 years since they sold this property, they're more than likely going to need a new legal description.
Right. So that's the thing. The sellers, when they found out, they sent us the description that they received when they did a refinance and when they purchased, and neither one of them had them in there either. So now we're in a space where we have to order a survey, and surveyors are saying 4 to 6 weeks.
Yes, they are. They are busy. It is not the time to need a survey, unfortunately. So yes, or more. Like I have a client who had an 86-acre lot. We're looking at 12 to 14 weeks to get in because of how much time it was going to take to do that survey. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could also technically, you could look at your title insurance and see if that should have been, because that's something that the attorney should have caught. Like there should have been an adequate legal description. So, I mean, but again, that takes time. I mean, you might be looking at more time if you're talking about a title insurance claim. And the whole point is to try to sell your property in this hot market. So I feel for the seller.
Right.
Yeah.
It's and those are the things that people, there's no way I could have known, the listing agent could have known. The only person who could have came up and saw that is when the attorney got the title.
Right. Or the refinance as well. Like there's 2 opportunities that the legal description should have been looked at to at least make sure that it was sufficient enough to give a title insurance to be able to underwrite it, to give that policy.
Right. So in cases like that, and I know this is not your case, do you think that the refinance went through because they were just reissuing title to the same person?
If it was the same attorney's office, yes. You probably would not look at it as closely as, you normally would. If it is another attorney's office, we generally don't look at title as much as closely as when it's a purchase, because there just aren't as many pitfalls, and there's already a title insurance policy on file. So really where it should have been caught is the initial purchase. But because of that, I've had a couple of issues where properties were purchased and then we refinanced them and there were issues. So we have changed our policy to be a little more strict about refinances. And, I know sometimes lenders don't like it, but sometimes it can save you heartache in the end when it comes to an issue like this. You catch it, you're like, hey, this is an issue, even though it's a refinance, I need a better legal description. And it might have been easier to go back to the firm because I don't know when they purchased it, but if they purchased it 5 years ago and they refied out 2 or a year later, it would have been a whole lot easier to go back a year later than it is 5 years to that previous firm where they purchased.
Right. That was the first time that ever came up for me. I wasn't sure what to do. So when they said a survey, I said, well, I had to get a survey. And they were like, well, can we just waive it? I said, then the seller, the buyer can waive their title insurance, but the lender's not.
Right.
They want to be insured.
And the buyer should never waive their title insurance. That is never a good idea, ever. No matter what the circumstances. If you're a builder, if you're getting it to live in, like, you should never waive that coverage. So you should always just do whatever it takes in order to get your title insurance policy.
Right. Tell us what title insurance does for the buyer anyway.
So with the owner's title insurance policy, what it does is it guarantees that title is clear. So if something comes up that should have been caught on title, like, 150 years ago or 200 years ago, someone did not sign a deed fully or didn't initial, or the dates were wrong, or there's something going on with the legal description. Title insurance gives you that policy and they say, hey, we're going to fix this without you having to come out of pocket. Okay, so that's what title insurance does. And when you have a survey in title insurance is going to cover all known issues. So if you have a survey and there's something on that survey, even if the attorney didn't catch it, because, sometimes we have to plot the actual legal description to make sure it matches. And sometimes, honestly, we're human, so we make mistakes. But even if the attorney didn't catch it, if you turn in that survey, you still have coverage. Like, the title insurance company is still going to make sure that you're good to go.
Gotcha. So, yeah, that's definitely key. Oftentimes people see the title insurance policy on the disclosures, and it's like,
they don't want to pay for it.
We can get rid of that $500. I was like, nah, like that's a no-no. If it's anything you want to try to keep, because title searchers are human, attorneys are humans, and we all make mistakes.
The abstractors are human. Yes. And, I'm going to be honest with you. When you look at the cost of a possible suit, so let's say we had to do a quiet title action. I mean, you're looking at, when you're talking about a quiet title action with you, which is what it would be you against all the world, which is the type of quiet title action you have to have in this situation. You're looking at a minimum of $10,000. Like, it's not even worth the risk to pay. Just go ahead and pay the $500.
Right. It's so, people trying to nickel and dime, try to save money.
Now, this is the time for middle class families. This is your primary investment. So you got to look at it like that. This is what you're going to pass down to your children. This is where you hold most of your equity and your wealth. So you have to be mindful of that and protect it adequately.
Got you. Now, once you guys have done the title search and it's come back with clear title, what's next in the process for you?
We have to send that title to the lender, which you're aware of. We send it to you guys. We have to send you a CPL, and we send you a draft HUD so you can see our fees and everything associated with the actual closing. We also have to get with the buyer and seller and just make sure all the information we have is correct and that it matches what's on title. Because even though the buyer, we don't do a quote unquote title search on them, we do a lien search. So that comes up as well. So lenders don't want a buyer that's going to get a house and then immediately have a lien placed upon it because they have outstanding debt. So we have to do a lien search on the actual buyer itself.
Got you. So let's talk about that a little bit, because some people ask, well, why would this judgment or lien stop us from purchasing? And I always tell them, if it's a judgment or lien, at some point, if the person wants to pursue you, it can supersede the mortgage.
Exactly. And it'll attach to the house. And lenders, technically it's a lender's investment. Like we always say, it's your investment. But until that mortgage is paid, this is their investment and they want to protect it. Because if they foreclose, they want to make sure they're going to get all the money that this property is worth, that they're able to get their mortgage back. Well, they can't do that if you have a bunch of liens on the property. So, federal tax liens, state tax liens, any type of judgment, All those things have to be cleared. I mean, sometimes it's as easy as getting your social and clearing it because you have a common name. Sometimes you can give me proof that the debt has been paid. But regardless, we got to make sure it's clear because technically in a transaction with a lender, the lender is the attorney's client. It's the closing attorney's client. That is technically who we represent. So that's whose interest we have foremost at the front of everything.
Right. And, you know, I tell people all the time, like, you just want to make sure that stuff is clear. You know, it's big, you know, it like we lose as a lender and we have the most invested into it 9 times out of 10. Yep. And then you lose as a buyer. And sometimes those liens and judgments aren't significant. It just depends on how bad the person wants to pursue it, you know, and
I mean, you definitely can pay it off from our perspective. Now, from a lending perspective, it might be different, but from a perspective of just clearing title, pay it off. Just be done with it so we can get it to make sure it's not going to attach to the property once you move in.
Yeah. So, you know, we run into those things. And a lot of times like you said, on those lien searches, it comes back. So prime example, state tax liens. Mm-hmm. If I see 9 of them on someone, the person has paid them, but they haven't been satisfied or released. So it's just a matter of getting in contact with the county or, you know, the state, Georgia, Delaware, wherever you're at, and just getting it cleared. So there's some work on the buyer's part. Now, what we ran into during COVID, now that was different. Yeah, because everything was closed. Nobody could go in anywhere. And then you had to catch someone on the phone. Luckily, I had some resilient buyers who just kept trying and trying and trying. And then we got a hold of, you know, people in the county offices and state tax lien offices, and some people had old paperwork, and it was just so much that had to be done in that process. It's already a tedious process without things being shut down, but when it shut down, there was a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, the shutdown affected us a lot, especially with getting title, because there's so many things that we have to get directly from the courthouse. It was very challenging in COVID, which is why even now people think, oh, we're out of COVID, but the county offices are not operating like normal, and neither are the federal agencies. Like they're still short staffed. They're not open the normal hours. You still have to make appointments. It's a lot to get documents. I have a probate right now that I'm working on that's connected to a real estate property, and that is very much the issue. We're 8 weeks in because we have to keep making appointments. I have to physically go down to DeKalb County because they don't have their records online. And because of COVID, they only allow so many appointments to so many people at a time. And with the backup, it's just a lot. Like I try to tell my agents, please, the day that you bind that contract, or if you know it's about to bind, like you know you're about to bind this contract, give me a heads up so I can go ahead and start working on it, because it is taking a lot longer than what they are normally accustomed to.
Right. And that's key. Like, you know, if you don't know, title isn't something you can just go online and search for and then pull it up. Like there's a lot more people besides the actual attorney and paralegals. There's the title searchers, the abstracts, and then they've got to get it, and then they've got to get it into you guys so you can review it.
Yeah.
So
and I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes there's still a problem, and I still have to go down to the courthouse myself just to look it up, just to get it done quickly. I'll go down there and go through the records, but I mean, think about that time process. And then you have, you know, we have 15 to 20 files on average in our office at a time that are being actively worked on. So you have to think about that as well.
Right. So once you send the closing disclosure over to us, the initial closing disclosure, what happens after, as they say, the CD is balanced? Then what is the next part?
We wait for the clear to close. So that is a lender specific task. We have to. I've had people be like, but everything else is done. I was like, but your lender hasn't said yes, technically yet. So until the lender says yes, like literally nothing happens. In our office, we won't even schedule without a clear to close. We'll give a tentative date and time. I'll get preferences on location. We'll make sure, names, IDs, all the preliminary things are done. But pretty much nothing can happen until the lender, our client, says that this file is ready to go.
Right. And so that's the thing. Like, we all have to be on one accord, right? Mm-hmm. And some agents, and I think it's maybe inexperience, think that when the initial CD goes out for the 3 days, or even if you get a final CD, that means you have it clear to close. That just means we have final numbers based off of August the 8th, 2021. That doesn't mean we have it clear to close. So those things are important. And I understand, like, sometimes the agents don't understand why you can't schedule the closing, because if you're remote and you're in Stockbridge or Douglasville and you need to get up to Atlanta and then get back, you want to make sure that you have everything you need before you leave the office, because I don't think you carry a printer around.
I actually do.
You do?
I actually do. I do. And we have, so the Regis locations that we close at, that we have a contract with, they have printers that we can print. We're set up to print. And we have Office Depot store purchase cards. So we will make it work. Because I have had those last minute changes. But, if I have to print a couple of pages, that's one thing. I keep it in my trunk. I plug it in. It's like a little desk printer. But if we have to print an entire package, that's going to be a trip to Office Depot, or I'm going to have to print it at a Regis location. So, it just varies. But yeah, we are mobile, but we like things to be done orderly. And so I don't even want a seller or buyer to have to leave and go somewhere else without having a clear to close. It's a waste of time for them. And I don't want that experience or frustration for them. So we typically wait until the lender says at the minimum clear to close. And then, sometimes you can be kind of delayed on closing packages, but at least we have the clear to close. So I know that if I get these documents and I can get to the closing, that we can fund today. Gotcha.
So once you guys have the clear to close and the package, kind of let's walk through the actual settlement piece, because you sitting down, going over numbers with the borrower still isn't the end.
No, it's not. So the closing is like the fun part, right? I get to meet everybody. We talk. You get to hear a little bit of my personality. I give you the spiel on my documents, the same spiel for every closing. But after that, we still have to do post-closing. So I fund it after I get done with that file. We typically send wires out within 2 hours of the closing. And then we have to do post-closing. So we have deeds that have to be recorded. The lender wants their package overnighted. They want their documents the next day. And it's really important that they get the original note and all the other documents back. The only original documents that I keep are the security deed, any attachments, and any type of warranty deed. But I have to get those recorded. And our timeline in our office is to get post-closing done, which is the recording, make sure the lender has their documents, send all the checks out for, insurance, HOA, all the payoffs. We send wires the same day, checks go out the next day, and all those deeds need to be recorded within 3 days of the closing. So that's our time frame. But there's a lot to be done. Like, we have a whole post-closing department that I pretty much hand the file off to. So I'll send the lender their documents, make sure I have funding authorization, and then I send the lender their part and give everything else to the post-closing department to handle.
Wow. Yeah, it's so much to it. Like right now, here we are in August, and I got an email from the lender we sold the file to on a closing that occurred in January. And they were missing the power of attorney. It was a power of attorney that came from overseas, and they used the copy, but they needed the original.
Yep. I actually request originals at closing. I won't close it at the original. It's just too much of a headache. So for the most part, our title insurance requires us to have the original in hand at closing. I don't have to have it in, through the beginning preliminary process, but at the closing table, I have to have the original. So I always tell sellers back when we send the informational sheet, when we first get the contract, that if they have a power of attorney or letters of administration in the aspect of an estate to make sure that they have the original with them when they come to the closing table.
Got you. And that's the same thing on the lender side. Like we have post-closing items.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people don't understand. That's why we're such a stickler for getting the documents we need up front. Because if we don't have all of the documents that we need when we try to sell it to the investor, they won't accept it because they want to have everything that's required. And they want to make sure that if they need to sell it, that they can sell it because they have all the proper documents. So we're not just asking for stuff because we want to make it difficult. We're asking because there's a process after everybody's in the house, everybody's got their checks and, ball till they fall. We still have work to do on the back end. Not me per se, but our secondary. And we got a post-closing team, just like you do.
Yeah, and it's a lot. It could be a lot because thankfully, Georgia, most counties are now e-filing. But before, we would have to literally UPS or FedEx original documents to the courthouse. The courthouse would be like, I can't find them. You have to be like, well, so-and-so signed for it. You have to track it down. Or I can't tell you how many times I'll look at, we reconcile our accounts every month. I'll look at accounts and I'll be like, the insurance company hasn't cashed their check. So you call the insurance company. Why is it not cashed? Like there's a lot that goes on after the closing, even months after, to make sure that everything has cleared and everything has been paid.
Yeah, it's a lot to it, it's a lot to it that people don't understand. And the conversation that you and I are having right now will open up the eyes to people and just let them see, okay, there's more to it than what we see up front. Some of the stuff you just explained to me, I didn't realize. I didn't know that you guys had the same thing, but it makes sense. Like we're doing a lot of the same things, except we're not recording stuff. So i.e. when I had to get the recorded power of attorney, I had to reach back out to the closing attorney to get it from them. So we're still working. So like, that's why underwriters are sticklers, because if some of those documents are missed, they have a license and they get dinged. And people don't know that.
Right. And same, it could be, if it's egregious enough, it can be considered malpractice. At the minimum, your underwriter doesn't like to see a whole lot of outstanding items on your reconciliation statement. And they can see when something hasn't been recorded because it hasn't been paid for. Or they can see that the insurance company, they don't really care what the reason is. They just see that it's unpaid. So you have a responsibility as a closing attorney to your underwriters, to your title insurance company. That's who regulates you, other than the Georgia bar. So you got to be on top of your reconciliation statements and everything that you do in post closing. And it can be difficult if you're having to mail or interact with third parties. And then it honestly, it takes them, even with e-filing, it's not instant. Like our documents are not recorded instantly. So it'll be 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and the lenders are like pounding at your door, like, where are my original documents? Why have they not been recorded? And you have to kind of tell them where you are in the queue to be recorded.
Wow.
Especially in this market, right? This market's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. In this market, it's probably even worse.
Yes, it is. They can get really overwhelmed and behind. And especially in COVID, for a little bit, they weren't actually processing. So when they opened back up, they started off behind.
Wow. It's so much to it. It's a whole lot to this real estate thing. It looks great and it looks sexy to say that you're a lender and a realtor and a closing attorney and attorney, but there's a lot more than what you see on the surface.
Definitely.
So you touched on that you are an investor yourself. Do you work with investors when they're trying to, do wholesale deals or investment properties? Do you work with any of that?
We do. And honestly, when we first started out, that was our niche. That's who the majority of our clients were investors. And I think it's just because we're not scared of like the title problems, the title issues, or we're not scared of double closing, or we've taken the time to understand the procedure, things of that nature that some attorneys' offices don't want to deal with. So when we first started out, that was our niche. That's how we got into it. And then as we've expanded, we do all sorts of deals, including developments. So I'm really excited. I'm doing my second huge major development right now. Hopefully it's going to close next week. But, you know, it's exciting to work with investors because, I mean, technically developments are investors as well. So, I mean, it is exciting. We do work with investors. I always tell people we're investor friendly. We understand assignments and wholesalings. We understand, you know, double closings. I do have to educate people, though, between assignments and double closings. So they're, you know, but in the end, I mean, when you know the subject matter, it puts the investor at ease and it allows you to work through some things, especially with tax lien properties, because we teach classes on tax liens. We get a lot of those. And there's a misconception that they cannot be insured by title insurance, and they actually can. It just takes a lot more steps.
Okay. So for our listeners, let's educate us on the difference between an assignment and a double closing.
So an assignment is typically what we do in Georgia because we have the right to assign contracts. So it'll be an A to B, B to C. A to B assigns their contract to B to C. Okay. It's an assignment. So what that means is that A to B doesn't really need any money. We rely on the end buyer's money on the B to C because it's an assignment. So C pays everything, including the gap fee on how the wholesaler makes their money. When it's a double closing, you literally have to have your A to B money, and then you have to have your B to C money. I know it works differently in other states, but in Georgia, that's technically what a double close is. Like, I have money for this transaction A, I have money for transaction B. That's a double close. Now, when it comes to assignments, I can close you all separately. Like, I can close the A by themselves with a separate settlement statement, the B by themselves with a separate settlement statement, because I know you're trying to protect, you know, what you made on the deal as a wholesaler. And the C to D, whether I can separate that, truly depends on who the end buyer is. If the end buyer is a cash purchase, I most certainly can separate it. If it is a lender that requires a combined settlement statement, they're going to see what you make. So you need to have that upfront conversation with the parties. So, I mean, the end buyer kind of determines how I'm able to conduct the last closing, but the initial one, which is typically always cash, I am able to do that, cash or hard money. So just know that the lender sometimes drives more than just a clear to close. Like, the lender has certain requirements, and a lot of lenders require combined settlement statements. And I have a lot of investors that get upset, but I tell them up front, hey, if the lender, your end buyer, requires that, we have to meet that requirement.
Somebody showing off, aren't they?
Yeah, you know what? And we're in a residential neighborhood. It's a nice car, though. I ain't gonna lie. It's a souped up Camaro.
Oh, okay.
But we're in a residential neighborhood. We need speed bumps. Our neighborhood's older. Like, we don't have an HOA. So I think we're just gonna have to complain and be like, put speed bumps out. Gotcha.
Wow, that's crazy. I know a good attorney that represents HOAs.
And it's funny because I live across the street from a retired police chief. I'm gonna go knock on the door and be like, what can we do to get some speed bumps?
Speed bump. Gotcha. So the closings, right, for wholesale deals, is it ever possible to close with the end buyer first so that the wholesaler has the funding for the seller?
So we typically don't, but as long as they close in the same day, it'll all go out. So whenever I have an assignment, I always tell them that one of the requirements is that they all close in the same day. It doesn't really matter what time they close if one closes before the other. It's just that if you close the B to C transaction first, you have to let them know that it's contingent on the A to B closing. So that's the only thing. It's like, hey, your transaction is going to be contingent on the A to B closing first because there's an assignment. And so I have to make sure that this transaction closes for yours to be valid. So I always tell people if they want to close earlier than the A to B, they can, but I'm holding their documents in escrow until the A to B closes. But I always schedule them on the same day because I don't want those problems. They always got to be scheduled on the same day because we're using the same funds and I want everything funded by 3:00.
Right. So what do you tell them when it comes to the wire? Because that's the first, like in residential transactions, that's the first thing. Like, is the wire hit? I'm not leaving till the wire's in my bank.
I mean, I've never had people do that. I always tell people, look, it's not an instant process. Wires aren't instant. I have to send my wire to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has to say yes. And then the Federal Reserve allows the bank to move the money. So sometimes it happens really fast, but sometimes it doesn't, especially in COVID. Like, I mean, we're literally talking 3-4 hours for a wire to go through in COVID times. Yeah. And I think it has something to do with the Federal Reserve being on a skeletal crew during COVID. But it's not always instant. And I tell people instant. I always tell people that. That's why I'm like, if we don't send your wire before 3 p.m., I cannot guarantee that you will receive it the same day. And it's not because I want to leave my bank. I just can't guarantee that you'll see it in your bank the same day. Right. That's our policy. It's on our initial welcome email. Let people know up front, hey, if we don't, if you want to close at 4:00, if you want to close at 7:00, we are more than willing to accommodate. But I want you to know the wire cutoff is 4:30. And anything after 3:00, you might not see it until the next day. So those are upfront conversations you have to have with communication, let people know what's going on. Or you can get a check. I'll give you a check. You can take this check right now and be done. Right.
So the welcome email that they're to read it on is the email. They say, oh, I never got it.
Always.
I never got
my
it.
My closing manager is Amber. And it's like her pet peeve because we have like our wire instructions, the information forms, the process, everybody's direct office number. So you don't have to call the main firm number because sometimes the main number gets inundated. And we have a receptionist, but by the time you get messages sometimes it's hours afterwards. So she does all this, all the appropriate emails, where everything should go. And then people are like, oh, I didn't get it. Like it is a pet peeve of hers. So typically what we do as a closing attorney, we like to have contact with people. And so I always check in with Amber to see what she's missing. And what she still needs. And then I check in with the agents, the buyers and the sellers. And I'm like, hey, we want this to close on time. And in order to close on time, I still am, expecting this from you, or I need such and such from you. So we try to have that communication so people aren't, aware 3 days before closing that we still don't have things. They've gotten several messages that we don't have something.
Right. So yes, it's you. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking of all the conversations that we have. Oh, I never got it. I was like, shoot, I was on the email.
Right. And I'm copied on all welcome emails, mind you. So usually what I do is not to be snarky, but I forward it from when Amber sent it to me. And like, hey, you did get it. So she told you, yeah. And then we send our wiring instructions encrypted. That's always an issue as well. Right. She tells them what in the welcome email, she tells them what to look for. But because people don't really read emails, even though we try to bullet point it, sometimes they miss that because we don't send our wiring instructions and we won't accept yours unless it's secure, fax or encrypted email, because we don't want to be responsible for your information falling in the wrong hands.
Right. Our company has started the policy of we can't even send the wire instructions to the borrower anymore. Wow. Yeah, like I think they did that so that if for some reason we picked up an email that had the wrong wiring instructions and we gave it to the buyer, right, that we're not held liable. So now whenever there's wiring instructions that's given, we give the final numbers and we ask them to reach out to the attorney's office, or I'll copy them on an email with someone at the attorney's office asking them to provide wiring instructions to the buyer. So they stopped us from giving them out just for that protection.
It's crazy. Fraud has been rampant. And honestly, we even asked them to call and verify wiring instructions with us before they send a wire, because there's been so much theft and fraud that we're just trying to avoid that where we can. So we always ask for verbal confirmation, just like lenders always verbally confirm. They will not send a wire without verbal confirmation of the wire instructions. And we just ask that our consumers, the borrowers, do the same thing.
Wow. So with the investment piece, those different types of closings, do you have any stories where it went awry because the wholesaler received more than what the seller thought, or they never, like, to them, they knew they were getting their 100, but they didn't realize that the wholesaler was getting, let's say, 15 or 20. Has that ever happened? Or?
Oh, yeah. So I was working at another firm, not this one, because I'm gonna be honest with you, after a couple of these blew up in my face, or it was like World War III, I talked to wholesalers about being upfront about what they're making. It's just better. If you're making over $10,000, it is my recommendation that you let them know what you have to do to wholesale, because if you properly educate them on what you actually have to do and how much work it actually is. I mean, it's good money when it works, but wholesale is a lot of work. So much work that I don't even want to do it because it's too much work. I don't have time to wholesale. You have to have time and energy, and it's a lot of work. So, but yeah, I was at the table at the firm I was working at in Midtown, and the guy, he was actually getting more than the seller. And it was a huge problem. And there's supposed to be a separate settlement statement. I was actually covering this for another attorney. So that makes it even worse, because you kind of walk in blind. You don't know what the expectations were. The attorney had an emergency. The closing had to be covered. So I covered it because I was already in the office. It was supposed to be a separate settlement statement. It wasn't, because if it had been separate, he would have never known how much the guy was making. But I think he walked away with like 60 something. But the guy was the wholesaler was walking away with like 90 grand plus, right? 90 grand and some change. So it was a huge talk down. It was a huge process. It was just a lot. It was a lot. And, you're under contract. You try to tell people, if you breach this contract, there's a possibility that you could be sued. People don't understand. They're like, well, it's my house. I can walk away whenever I want. No, you can't when it's under contract. A lot of people don't pursue it, but if they wanted to, they could. And the wholesaler probably is going to, because this is their business. It's not a residential purchase for them.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it definitely happens. I definitely prefer, when I can, to separate the statements, or I prefer to have wholesalers who are upfront and, just honest about what the process is and what they're making.
Right. Because I guess it's twofold, right? The seller is selling it thinking that they're getting the most out of it that they can. And so I get that, right? However, like you said, the wholesaler does so much work with trying to get the buyer that if they can get someone to buy it for more,
right,
and the seller gets what they asked for, I don't see where that's a problem. That's me.
Right.
It
shouldn't be. I bought from wholesalers before. They're like, I'm a wholesaler. I'm making. I was like, I don't care what you're making, as long as I can get it for the price that I need it to be, and the numbers make sense for whatever I'm trying to do with this property. I don't care what you're making off of it, because I didn't have to. It's not on market. I didn't have to search for it. I didn't have to compete with traditional buyers. So there's a benefit there. And at the same time, that's something sellers need to keep in mind. Typically investment properties are houses that cannot cut the mustard for FHA or inspections. And so if you can't do that, you are going to take away a majority of your buyers right there. If you can't meet those qualifications, and there's significant work that has to be done on the property, it's just not going to cut the mustard when it comes to a residential deal. So you kind of take that into account. Like, there's some work that's going to have to be done on this house. That's why I tell people when you flip, like, you're looking at the end result, right? That I bought the house and I made X amount of dollars, but you don't understand that I use hard money, which is expensive, right? I put 50 to 60 grand in it to renovate the house, and that took me 90 to 120 days. Like, you didn't have the funds to do that. You don't have the capabilities to do that, to get this house elevated, to be able to sell on the market.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, they don't understand like the process. So like that hard money, while it's easier to get because of fixing and flipping, what's hard for me is paying that interest only every month.
That interest is no joke. Like, what? Like, especially when you're used to seeing housing residential interest rates, be between 3 to 5%. I mean, the interest rate on hard money is ridiculous. And then all the fees associated with it, like, it's a lot. It's a lot. So people, you got to be mindful. That's why it has to work. That's why the numbers have to work up front. But it's a lot. People don't understand that. They really don't. They don't take that into consideration.
Right. They don't. So since we're talking about the investment piece, and we're talking about fixing and flipping and wholesaling, what is your take on trust? When should they be used and when they shouldn't be used?
So it's hard for me to give a bright line. It's very fact specific when you should use a trust. It depends on what your objective is. I've done some family trusts, because they want certain requirements to be associated with the property. So typically, if you're trying to mandate certain things, it would have to that they would have to be a part of the trust. It would have to be in a trust to mandate certain things, because there are certain with certain ownership. So like fee simple, we can't mandate certain things when somebody owns a home in fee simple. And fee simple is what you typically see. Like when I sell my home from A to B, I own the home in fee simple, which means I can do whatever I want to do with it. There are no restrictions on my ownership. But there are other tenancies as well. In Georgia, we have joint tenancy with the right of survivorship. We have just a regular, what they call joint tenancy, okay, when you just own it together. And then we have life estates as well. So there are different tenancies. They're just not as common. But when you want to put conditions on things, it's a good time to have a trust. If you are trying to protect your assets from being detected, like you don't want them personally attached to you, it may be a good time to have a trust. But I'm gonna be honest with you, more often than not, people come to me for trust and I'm like, why do you want a trust? Because trusts are expensive and they cost money to maintain. So tell me why and tell me how much is the asset that you're attempting to put in here to make sure that it makes monetarily, it makes sense. I don't know. I think there's some gurus going around telling people to put things in trust in blanket statements. And what I always tell people is that real estate law is very specific from each state. So I'm in a bunch of real estate law groups on Facebook, and they'll ask a question. And the first thing always for me is, what state are you in? Because that changes the answer. Depending on what state you're in is going to determine what is the most amicable vehicle for you to be in. For most people in Georgia, you are covered by just having an LLC and treating your LLC appropriately. Okay, making not commingling funds, treating it like a true business, having an EIN, separate bank account. If you do those things and you treat the business like a business, most of the time in Georgia, you are good. You're covered. You don't need a trust. Other states, they can be different. They can be more advantageous in other places. But in Georgia, I just think that the LLC, for the most part, for the reasons people are getting trust, will cover them. And it's a lot cheaper. It's a much cheaper vehicle.
Gotcha. So let's use me, right? Mm-hmm. I'm purchasing investment properties, buying whole properties. And right now I have my investment properties in the LLC. I want to protect my family from beyond me. So like my kids, my grandkids, depending on how far long we keep the property, is it advantageous to keep it in the LLC, or should I put that in the trust to protect it?
It depends. If you just want to keep it for your kids, you can put it in the LLC, and you can add members to the LLC, because the members of the LLC is who dictates the operations of the LLC. So my children are members of, or they will be members of, a couple of LLCs that I have. Once I get done, moving everything around and doing what I want to do, they'll be members of it. So those members have votes depending on their membership status, and they're able to steer the direction that the LLC goes with the assets, no matter what the decision of the LLC is. If you are like, I want this family property and I don't want it to be sold, and it has to stay in the family, and it never is to go to someone that's married in, and I never want it to be commercial. Like, if you have all those conditions, that's when it's time to start looking at a trust. But if you just want to keep it in the family, you can definitely do that with an LLC.
So I told my sons, and they're 10 and 6. 10 and 6. But I told them, never sell my mom's house. Should I put that in the trust? And when I say never, I mean, I don't want them to ever. I'm not selling it. I don't want them to sell it.
Yeah, I definitely some family trust. And it's because these people wanted to be quote unquote family property. So anybody that fell on hard times to come and live at this family property, they have it in a trust. Gotcha. So it can't be sold. And if it is sold, or, eminent domain or something crazy happens, it dictates what's to happen next. And for them, it was to buy another family property with the residual funds in the trust. So that's when it's good. If you're just like, I want to keep my property, I want to have legal protection, that is not a good reason to have a trust.
Gotcha. So, and I think that's where it kind of comes from. You're right. I've heard a lot of people give a blanket statement of everything, you need to put it in a trust for this and that, or you just need to put it in a trust. But I don't think, I've never purchased the course to find out if they say anymore, first of all.
I'm telling you, that's why I tell people, don't be frustrated when your attorney starts asking questions and you think you know what the best vehicle is. It's like, it's their job to make sure that, and they very well be right, but I need to know that you're right. I need to know the circumstances so I can advise you the best way.
Gotcha. So essentially, with trust, whether you need to have one or not have one, all depends on your specific goal in mind for your property and your specific situation.
Yeah, and what state you're in.
State.
What state you're in is going to determine a lot. It's going to determine, how they're treated, how trusts are handled in that state, and what type of trusts are in that state. So yeah, definitely what state you're in factors into that as well.
Got you. So you talked about also you have your second large development closing. What part do you play in the development piece aside from actually closing on the land portion? Like, can you explain that?
I can. So I help out with the due diligence portions that are required for an attorney and required for construction loans. So most large lenders are going to require you to have your own counsel when you go for any type of construction loan whatsoever. My last one before this one was a church, and SunTrust was a lender, and they have their own counsel who actually is an escrow agent and handles the closing, but you have to do all the due diligence, get all the documents to the other attorney, prepare documents that they need, and write title opinions based upon the actual title report that comes in. So, there's a lot that you would have to do. But in this instance, I am the closing attorney. So I'm just gathering all the I'm telling everybody what I need. There's literally a checklist that I use to show everybody what I need and who's responsible for it when it comes to a development. And because my investor, I have a previous relationship with him, but he invests mostly in California. I'm also advising him on what the requirements are for Georgia. So, making recommendations for survey companies, making recommendations for commercial specialists that can help me divide the plats and make sure that everything is supposed to go the way it goes, the environmental piece. So all those things that they need to know if it's a requirement is what I'm doing. Helping them, just helping them out. Basically, if you're a more experienced developer, he's a very experienced developer, he just hasn't developed in Georgia.
Got you. So his development is here in Georgia?
It is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about the previous one? Are you licensed in any other state other than Georgia?
I am, but I don't practice real estate in any other state other than Georgia.
Okay. Got you. Yeah, I've got a podcast coming up that I've with a gentleman out of Texas who went through the development stages. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a lot though. My dad's like, did the deal close yet? I'm like, no, because development takes forever because there's so many pieces and there's so much that has to be done. And because you're going to do something with it, like in their instance, they're building, it's mixed use and residential and commercial, and then they have some purely commercial buildings. You have to make sure that everything is done correctly on the front end because you don't want any problems or any, you don't want any hiccups once construction starts.
Is your dad doing any building for him?
No.
Oh, okay.
He needs a much bigger. No. He needs a much bigger construction situation than what my dad will be able to handle.
Gotcha. Okay. Got you. So, your opinion of the real estate market currently? Do you see things stabilizing at all on your end, or do you still see the same hustle and bustle?
There are still as many purchases as far as hustle and bustle. It definitely that part has not slowed down, but I think there is a slight correction in the pricing, right? So I think there's been a slight correction in that area. I've seen a lot of houses come back on market or not. Finally, they're not meeting the absurd price, or, appraisals coming back lower than the list price. So I'm seeing a little bit of that, but I still think there's going to be another market correction in the fall.
Yeah, I think so too. While people they think it's going to crash and it'd be like it was in, the Great Recession. I don't think that. I think there'll be a market correction. And I probably said it on 4 or 5 podcasts, and I'm gonna say it again. My reasoning for that is the inventory. There is none.
Right.
In 08 to 11, there was tons of houses. Now,
bad loans. In 08, there was bad loans and they shouldn't have lent to people, and it caused people to be, underwater. Here, the market is driving the uptick in prices, and demand is driving the need for additional houses. I think it's different. I think there's going to be a market correction, but I'm with you. I don't think there's going to be a crash.
Now, if there is a recession because people start losing stuff, it's because of the PPP loans.
Oh yeah.
But nah,
there's plenty of jobs. I mean, some of the restaurants, I live in Douglasville, and some of the restaurants can't even open because they don't have enough people. So there's plenty of jobs. It's just a matter of, I guess, getting people in the right places. So I don't think it's going to be like 08. I think it's going to be a different feel to it. But the market always corrects itself. Like there's always been minor correction. I think people are just sensitive because we've lived through a market crash.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we went to Cracker Barrel one day this week, and the manager was taking orders, bussing tables, and bringing out food. Yeah. And she said she can't hire anybody. She said she can hire 16-year-olds, but now they're going back to school. Then, she doesn't have the help.
So, as those economic payments dwindle and people have to start paying rent or mortgages again, I think you'll see a different, breakdown as far as labor. Right.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I told my wife yesterday, we were riding, I said, I've never seen a Walmart "we're hiring" sign on 85. And I saw one. Like right off the yield sign to get on the 85, biggest day, hiring $14.10 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I said that about Target. Our Target is hiring. And I was like, what? I've never seen a position posted like that I could physically see for a Target.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Waffle House has the big letters across. We are hiring.
It's a crazy time, but you know, thank God we're all healthy. I'm able to see my friend. We're able to talk and discuss real estate. This has been an awesome podcast. And I'm not saying that because it's mine. I'm saying it because I feel like you did an excellent job, you know, explaining information. And people should definitely learn. What I did was I learned when I was a realtor, right? On the realtor side, I learned what I was to do as a real estate professional. Mm-hmm. I learned what the lender did, and I learned what the attorneys did. That mm-hmm. way I knew the process of how we work, because at the end of the day, we're all a team.
Definitely.
We're all a team. I need the real estate agent to get the leads, get the sales contracts. They need me to fund the deals, and I need the attorney to make sure that we have clear title, everything's recorded, and that everybody who has a vested interest in this property is covered. And that's the scope of real estate. You have to work as a team, anywhere from the home inspector all the way down to the abstract title person who I never met, but I need them.
Right.
I need them.
I don't even need them all the time. So yeah, that's fine. But yeah,
and you pay them.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. I have a couple of abstractors I've never met, especially the ones who do Middle Georgia for me. We've never actually met in person. So, but yeah, invested in what they're doing, invested in their job.
Gotcha. So Jacinda, for anyone who wants to reach out to you and to have your services, whether it's real estate closings or development work, or how to do a profit wholesale deal so you're not fighting at the table, how can they reach you?
So our main phone number is 404-941-8979. That's the main number that the receptionist answers. You can also email me, which honestly is probably better. My email is Jacinda, Jacinda at Regal, Regal, legal, Legal, LLC.com. And then we'll be able to schedule.
I'm sorry. I guess, do you have any social media they can reach you on for the firm?
We do. Now you asking. Now you see, look, now you showing my weakness. Now I got to look at my social media. Yeah, we have social media that obviously I don't run because I don't even run my personal social media.
Right.
No, we do. We have an Instagram. It's Regal Legal ATL. And it has our logo. It has Regal Legal Services on it. And we also have Facebook for Regal Legal Services. And so our logo is the green and purple R and L. That's our logo. But yeah, you can definitely find us on there. I'm going to be honest, I'm a little more active on Instagram, okay, than I am Facebook. My daughter told me that Facebook is for old people. I have teenagers. So my daughter told me that Facebook is for old people. So I've been trying to, get hip to Instagram and trying to figure out TikTok. So that's my life.
Well, Jacinda, this has been an awesome interview. I look forward to doing a part 2 and just kind of seeing how things progress. This is the Real Estate Proverbs Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Jefferson. Have a blessed day.
Thank you for watching the Real Estate Proverbs Podcast with Kevin Jefferson. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can be notified when the latest video drops.